think that the obvious intention of Wes Streeting, the new Secretary of State for Health, to open the NHS even up to private businesses is fascinating, but we need probably a little bit more detail before we can dive into that properly, except for the principle of it. Does this mean that the NHS, how comfortable are we? I warned you that thoughts were jostling for prominence. How comfortable are we with the idea of private companies making some money out of what the NHS does? Because this ties in with the big announcements from Rachel Reeves about making public money available to support private sector. And you'd think, wouldn't you, looking at the state of the waterways, that this was an absolutely disastrous thing to do. But, of course, if you can get your head around the idea of limits on private sector profits, so you can run a water company, for example, but you can't take home a £2 million dividend if you're pumping shocking amounts of sewage into that is going to be the way forward. That is not socialism in any conventional sense, but is it inevitable? But that's not where we are going today, I don't think. What I want to do today is talk about people who are not working. There are two types of people who are not working currently: people who don't want to work and people who can't work. Actually, there's probably three types, isn't there? People who are ready and willing to work but are currently and hopefully briefly in a space where they haven't got the right opportunity. That's always a fascinating question, isn't it? How long is too long? And you know, what parameters, or by what do you start getting squeezed to the point where you take a job after 10 weeks signing on that you wouldn't have taken after 2 weeks? But it's the health element of things that intrigues me most. Just so you know, because I know a lot of people are concerned about this, I am looking at long COVID, and we will be talking about it at some point in the very near future, because I think long COVID is a very, very important and a probably criminally overlooked element of some of the things that we're about to talk about, some of the reasons why people are economically inactive or people are out of the workforce for health reasons. 2.8 million people off work due to long-term sickness. The key difference in rhetoric, and I'm very surprised that this needs explaining, but I guess if you are struggling to work out what to do in a world where your dreams of Brexit, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, Theresa May, and even David Cameron have been dashed to smithereens upon the rocks of reality, then you are going to need some fairly straightforward stuff explaining. And one of the first things that needs to be explained is that the difference between saying you're a malingering skiver, get your ass back to work, and saying you are poorly, we need to help you get back to work, is huge. In many ways, this is the what would you call it? The distillation, the essence of the difference, for me at least, and this is simplistic but sincere, the difference between left-wing and right-wing politics. In many ways. And there are good conservatives. Alex Chalk has given a very it's the curse of O'Brien again. He's given a very interesting interview about how he actually wanted to stop sending so many people to jail for short prison sentences because they do way more harm than good, something that the new Minister James Timpson happens to agree with. But but for me, the distillation of certainly the binary breakdown between left and right politics really comes into focus when you remember how Mel Stride was talking about 2.8 million people off work due to long-term sickness, essentially saying that they just needed to pull their socks up, or that it was easy, for example, to get a mental health diagnosis, and that loads of people were choosing to live on the pittance that you can secure by getting this assignation as opposed to being out and doing work. Versus, and Wes Streeting is not, I don't think, a particularly cuddly politician, but there is nothing fundamentally bad about saying that you want people to get back to work to contribute more and drive economic growth, because it depends which end of the telescope you're deploying. If you approach this subject honestly and compassionately, you speak to countless people who really want to work but currently can't. how many times when we had the conversations inspired by the performative cruelty of male stride did we hear from people who cited the importance of the role that the employer plays in this process? That the employer who recognizes that you can't work today but you really want to work tomorrow, metaphorically speaking, is worth their weight in gold. And that figure of 2.8 million people off work due to long-term sickness would be much higher if there were not employers out there who understand the difference. Jamie uses one of my favourite words, the quintessence he reaches for. I prefer distillation. The quintessence of the difference is that the left want to help and the right want to blame. We've spent years being told by our government that they hate us, with the caveat, the parentheses, that they don't mean you. Oh, we absolutely hate you, but we don't mean you. If you're off sick, we hate you. Don't want to help you. But, no, we don't mean you. I know you're really sick. Oh, of course. Absolutely hate you. Hate immigrants. Oh, no, we don't mean you. We certainly don't mean your parents. We don't mean you. So and the problem with the left, of course, historically, can be idealism and naivety. I mean the sensible left, the rational left, the centrist left, if you like, as opposed to the headbangers, that there is a willingness to believe the best of people even when they don't deserve it. So you can't deny that there will be some people on long-term sickness who are swinging the lead. You just can't deny it. Of course there will be. But it's such a measly existence to have selected that to use that tiny minority to somehow portray the entire population of poorly people is bogus. It's disgusting, but it's also ridiculous. It makes as much sense as finding an asylum seeker who's committed a crime and using that as a basis for not wanting any asylum seekers to be offered asylum in this country. But it works, as we have seen. It works rhetorically, even if it doesn't actually work in policy terms. So how do we do this? 11 minutes after 10 is the time. I think we do it like this. I think we look at the question of how much help you currently get when you can't work but want to. How does it actually break down? I want you to feel a little bit liberated this morning. I want you to breathe a cautious sigh of relief. I want you to recognise that although Wes Streeting is not a cuddly politician, he is describing you as being long-term sick and presuming that you would rather not be out of work. He is not describing you as work shy or lazy, as malingering or as lying about your condition. So, how can he help? Or how can the system help? What is the obstacle to work that you think could actually be taken down? Because it could all be built on naivety, this. It could all be built on optimism trumping reality. How many of the 2.8 million people currently off work due to long-term sickness can actually be helped back to work quite easily? And the only people that can tell us that, I think, are the people currently in that situation. So what do you need? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What would it look like? What would policies look like? If we're going to, I think I'll use the word celebrate. I know I'm setting myself up for a big fall if they don't deliver any of the things that they're promising to deliver, but you've got to have hope. I even had hope when Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister for exactly 2 hours and 43 minutes. So I am hopeful that a lot of people who are long-term sick can be helped back to work. And the first step on that path is to stop screaming at them that they're lazy, work-shy layabouts and stop feeding into that Rupert Murdoch rhetoric that the British public are not deserving of respect and that they're all lying and they're all disgusting. Brackets, I don't mean you. The first step to helping people back to work is to believe their reasons for not being at work. So what then? What's the second step and the third step and the fourth step? How do we actually help you? And if you're a doctor or an employer, what help do you need? But in the first instance, how do we address? Do you know what? Actually, I'm a bit conscious of overdosing on hopium. But actually, I've done one of those intros where I've got to the end of it and I'm a lot more pepped up than I was at the beginning, because that big change, that sea change in rhetoric, albeit that it's not a violent sea change, and Streeting, hasn't sort of come out and put his arms around everybody who's long-term sick, but he has not called them lazy, has not claimed that people with depression are dishonest. He's not claimed that people with post-traumatic stress disorder should sort of pull their socks up and give their head a wobble. He seems to be coming at it from a different and refreshing perspective, all underpinned by the distinctively conservative, small c conservative idea that one of the main reasons to help people get better is so that they can pay more taxes. I've got no problem with that. And I don't really think you have. I don't see how you can have a problem with that, as long as people are genuinely better and generally being helped into that position.